Welcome back to The Journey. It's nice to have you with us, and today we're talking with Laura Myers. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Laura, you are all over the place busy with this church, and so I'm sort of curious how you ever came to St. Joseph. You know, I've talked to you before, but I don't think I've ever really asked you how long you've been here.
We moved here from Virginia in September of 2000, so it's been over 22 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's been a little bit of time.
It has.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. How did you find out about this parish?
When we moved, we had small children, and my faith is important to me, so I knew I needed to attend Mass because that's part of my faith. And the thought of bundling small people in the car to go someplace I know we needed to be without stress was important, so here we are.
So it's close enough to not give you headaches and heartburn.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
That's
Yes.
good. Well, you know, you said your faith is important to you. How did you get there? Let's start at the beginning and find out how your journey really began.
I'm a great Catholic, so grew up with a strong faith in the house. Growing up, there were 6 of us. Dad was very strong. Mom was very strong. Set a great example about service as part of faith. They taught religious ed. We helped with, Dad actually taught confirmation class. So the service project we did, there was a homeless shelter in Boston, because I grew up in Massachusetts, and we would make sandwiches once a month and bring them down. We would serve the sandwiches in the homeless shelter. So that was an experience, but they always had they were great role models. So
You just started to pick up right where they were.
I like to hope so.
Well, you know, in you saying that they were strong,
Mm-hmm.
What did you pick up as a child that was strong? Or did you notice that the strength in their faith was something you discovered later, more mature?
I think growing up, church is something we do.
So
And it was
sort of a
it was
given.
there. It was just always there growing up, and it's still like that to this day. They live in South Carolina. When we go down, we go to Mass. When we get together, we had a big anniversary party for them, and I'm the oldest of 6, and there are a lot of grandchildren, I think 19, and whoever was there, we all went as a massive group. So it's just something that has always been there, and I credit my parents. They must have had an immense amount of prayer, because for all of us in this time to be together, no major, like you hear of people's journeys and the burdens they carry with them, and I like to think that we are relatively lightly burdened.
Wow, that's a blessing. I mean,
Yes.
You are definitely blessed in
Definitely.
being able to say that.
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of people say, though, by contrast, that the burdens were good for them. And so I'm looking at influences here and how the journey, if we're driving a car, sometimes we get off at the wrong exit. Right? Did you ever get off at the wrong exit?
My faith was I didn't practice my faith as well as I should have in college. I will say that. And as a consequence, when my son was looking at schools, he was looking at a couple of Christian schools. And he ended up going to Messiah, and I remember distinctly on the car ride, I said to him, "How do you feel about this being a obviously Christian school?" And he kind of pondered for a minute, and he turned it back on me, and he said, "Well, how do you feel about it?" And I told him that when you go to college, my impression is that that's when you're going to fall away from your faith. And if you go to a school where there is a strong influence on faith and people are active, I would hope in their faith that you have that with you. And for whatever reason, he decided to go.
So your reaction, your impression was important to him, but
I never knew that.
That was a big surprise. Well, That's pretty cool that he had that same thought, that same impression, and that was important to him.
Yeah.
Well, as you journeyed through then, most people do say what you just said about college. What were some of the interesting things in your faith journey? I mean, did you have any, if we keep with the metaphor here, did you go sightseeing? Did you see some wonderful things along the way in your faith that you really love to remember?
I don't know. I think I followed the example that my parents set, where it's important to give back. to recognize that you're blessed and to turn around, give back, and to share what you have. My husband was in the military, so I was a distant spouse for a while, and church was still very strong. And at that point, I taught religious ed because I felt like I needed to be engaged. And there was a wonderful nun there, and she gave some continuing religious ed for the adults, so I took advantage of that. One thing that I really liked about growing up is we were in a very small parish, very different from St. Joe's, like
wow,
tiny.
Yeah.
And the director of religious ed was a nun, and we were very close to her. And I think having that positive influence was also important. And I think that helped me get to where I am today, too.
Yeah. So you had some real highlights, in a small parish.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to be in a big parish now?
It took a while to get involved because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I find that
Can be.
if you get involved in some of the smaller groups, your circle is smaller, but it's an important circle to have. Mm-hmm. It's important to surround yourself with people you can relate to and who encourage you to grow mm-hmm. and challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need the challenges, don't we?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what happens?
You're stagnant.
Yeah.
Yeah, take a lot for granted.
Yeah, we get lazy about the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's important to do the service. It's important to challenge yourself. I mean, all of those are good. Now, you're involved with Stephen Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that. What's
that was the Holy Spirit.
Exciting. Yeah, we want to hear Holy Spirit stories.
That was absolutely the Holy Spirit because I didn't know anything about it. And when Cece was here, she kind of brought it in and brought us back on board because I understand that we have been a member of Stephen Ministry for over 25
you mean
years.
This parish?
Yes,
yeah.
We had been enrolled and we had been dormant, I guess, for whatever reason. So Cece came in and she was advertising in the bulletin. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, oh, I should figure out about that. So the nudge was always there. So I got involved with that. And I went through the class and I was commissioned in 2017. And then I think it was in 2019 that I decided that maybe I should be a leader. Because she was very good about saying, we need another leader. We need another leader. So I need to start picking up that mantra too.
Good for you. Wow. Have you felt that was also a big growth for you
mm-hmm.
personally?
Very rewarding. I think that my weekend of learning how to be a Stephen leader was just like a retreat. It was just amazing. And I had gone to, I like to call it interdenominational because there are just so many Christian faiths that are involved in that. And there was a Catholic group that was there and they were local and they said, well, we're going to, and I forget what they called it, but it was basically adoration, but it was like no other adoration you've ever been to. So there were 6 of us, and as I'm getting in the car, I can hear my husband saying, what are you doing getting in the car with these strangers going who knows where? But I went anyway, and it was a very young, vibrant church, and it was just a very different experience because it was contemporary music. It was a loud adoration service, and it was one of those things where it gave me a lot of hope because there were a lot of young people there. Mm-hmm. And it was like they had come from practices, they were in their uniforms, they were very active in their faith. And I guess they are one parish in that area who, they have a lot of young men who discern going into the priesthood. So I think they're doing something right.
Oh my, I guess so. It's very different than ours though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I still have a lot of hope because I see a lot of the younger women who are in the Saturday morning prayer group. And that also gives me a lot of hope.
What I meant was that adoration was different in other parishes. But
I don't mind the
just
adoration.
For the record.
I do love the adoration here, but that was very different. Yeah.
Well, in your ministry with Stephen Ministers, it's for people that don't know. We should probably define what we're talking about. Yeah. What is Stephen Ministry?
So Stephen Ministry is a lay ministry. We provide one-on-one Christian care to people who are going through a time of trouble. And we meet you where you are, and men are matched with men and women are matched with women, and we accompany you for however long you need us to. We believe that God is the cure giver, and we are the caregivers, so there is no pressure on us to do anything but be there and be supportive.
So the pressure is not on us. The responsibility is on God and the Holy Spirit, who, God is the healer.
Right.
Can you give us what your thoughts are about healing and suffering and all of that, because in your ministry, no doubt, you really are encountering a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm amazed with the people I encounter, the burdens they carry, and you would never know it until they open up and share, and it's a very humbling experience when people open up and let you in. Yeah, suffering is hard, but if you look at what Christ went through, and doing the consecration to St. Joseph, and you get a deeper understanding of kind of what that family life was like. They were refugees. They were very poor. Like the whole thing kind of comes together about their suffering in the world and having faith in God and trust that, I don't understand what the purpose is. Someday, hopefully I might know, but, you trust that it's happening for a reason.
Yeah, I imagine that's one of the tougher things about being a Stephen minister is helping somebody along that unknown path. Have you heard from them anything that, just really surprised you and encouraged you with your own life? I mean, were there things that they were sharing that God has done, healings or anything? I would imagine that there'd be a lot of stories along the way, but it might be hard to think of them right now. But
just the fact that they still have faith in the midst of all the struggles that they go through.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, God promises to take us through all of these things. So as you go through your time here at St. Joe's, are there other things that you would encourage people to get involved in that you've been involved in the past, or are you right now?
I love being a Eucharistic minister, and I think my favorite masses for those were the First Communion masses. Like when the little people get to make their first communion, and then just to see the excitement on their face. And also some of the way people approach the altar with such reverence.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the wonderful things about being Catholic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that many denominations, really go that way. Did it make you remember your first communion?
A little bit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I never went through something like that,
yes.
So, I can only imagine what that would be like.
As I reflect back, I think I was more excited than I was reverent.
Well, that's sort of normal, isn't it?
I guess so, yeah.
And then you watch your siblings going through it, because you're the oldest, so you. And now you're children.
And the kids too, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the Eucharist is definitely a special thing. Are there parts of the Eucharist that, or the Mass that are really special and meaningful to you?
I think it's more, yes, it is, but I think I also have a greater appreciation for adoration now, because I never had that growing up. We didn't have an adoration chapel, and it wasn't something we did, but I know that we are very blessed to have an adoration chapel here, and I can get peace there like I can get no place else. It's just a heavy, pervading sense of peace.
That's something, again, not a lot of people use, probably.
It's intimidating. If you've never done it before, it can be intimidating, because you're going like, what do I do? I've never done this before. Where's the instruction manual? And it doesn't exist, because it's part of building a relationship, and it's going to look different for everybody. So it's an opportunity to connect with God.
So walk somebody through. Okay, but imagine they're walking through the doors. Yeah. How would you give them encouragement to, really make the most of adoration time?
Take it slow. Like, if it's something you've never done, be patient with yourself, because it is something very new and something very different if you've never done it before. I usually go in with a book. I have I think, who did it? There's a small book I'm using, and it's not something that I sit there and read the whole time. I try and take time to listen to, because conversation is listening. So, personal prayer, whether it's formatted formal prayers or if it's just off the cuff, because conversation. reading and reflecting on maybe a Bible verse or something that helps you connect with your faith and helps you grow. Time to listen, ending prayers. And some days it goes really fast, and other days it's like it's only been 10 minutes. But it's like a visit with anybody else. You go and you put the time in and you build a relationship.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about. And I think, to me, the adoration time, which I've done both here and in other places, was difficult just because it was unstructured, so quiet.
We're afraid of quiet. We don't know what to do with quiet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Both of those things were very hard for me. And, it is definitely a discipline. But, people ask all the time, how can you hear God? What would you say to that? How do you
It's not
hear
always
God?
words. A lot of times it's a nudge. And it's it's a feeling. It's like, go this way or consider this. It's not always you're going to get words from God. You're like, oh, okay. It doesn't happen that way for me.
Yeah. A nudge is probably a good way to say that. I've sometimes said to people that, if you've prayed, then the next thing that sort of comes to you is very likely a message from God. If you've just prayed about something, then pay attention to what comes next.
Yes, and I went to, it was a Wednesday afternoon, and I went to the small chapel because I was going to go to confession. And Father Armando was setting up, and I kind of did my adoration before it was all set up. And one word that I had prayed was vulnerable. And then he put the Eucharist in the monstrance, and he turned it and he stepped away. And that word came right back at me. Like,
wow.
Okay, vulnerable, this is vulnerable. I'm like, so that was one strong one that I can remember recently. That I was just like, okay, I get it.
I'm supposed to think about this. Is that what you got?
You say you want to be vulnerable and you want to be receptive and present and, meaningful interactions with people. But you think about how vulnerable God is in the species of the Eucharist. Like, okay, vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. He makes himself very vulnerable.
Yeah, and the cross hanging in our sanctuary is, another one of those big reminders.
Right.
And again, the blessings of being Catholic, so that we have that reminder.
Right.
That he was vulnerable. He wants us to be vulnerable. He knows what we're going through.
And it gets back to the suffering. Like, there's your picture of suffering.
Yeah. But he's with us.
Right.
I mean, that's really the thing to think about. Well, of all the things that you've said, I guess that's really what hits me the most is, the beauty of being quiet and listening and the importance of, spending time doing something that's going to help you grow, because we have to be proactive.
Right.
I mean, we can't just sit and fold our hands and come to church once a week and hope that it's going to
all works out.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, zap me, God. I don't want to do anything, but you do the work. But we do have to do some of the work.
We do.
Well, thank you, Laura, for sharing your journey.
Okay.
Both as a kid, as a mom, as a person, as a servant, doing so much for our church. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so stay tuned for another person's journey. And we invite you to think about sharing more.